All right, so for Gregor's problems, and again, we're not going with he's a bug. We want to go kind of beyond that. Tommy, what's one thing that you have?
His dad doesn't like.
Scale of 1 to 10. 1 like annoyed with him. 10 like basically ready to disown him as a son. You're putting this as severe as it would get. Okay, so dislikes him. Did Brent? You were writing despise. Was that? Were you going with the same thing? Like father despises him.
His family despises.
Okay. Would you agree? Father's at the top of it. Okay. So dislikes him, despises him, disowns him. Basically, any kind of D word that we could put in there, we'll come up with. All right. Additional things.
You can't work.
Gregor cannot work.
Yeah.
Okay. Jack. What's a good word for like? Okay, we said like parasite. I'm going to go with father exploited him. So it's the same thing as using him, but you're using him for his own purposes. Now, there's one thing I'll say about this, and you can decide. I'm not trying to convince you that it was a good move by father, but we know he ends up saving money from his business, and you get the sense that he also saves some money from the paychecks that Gregor is making, so that there's a little bit of like an emergency fund. You could argue in some ways that his father's pretty wise, so that should some issues take place, he has a little bit of a fallback option. But at the same time, father's not working, mother's not working, Greta doesn't working. It seems like Gregor would be the only one who's trying to contribute to the family. You would think if it's your debt that he's trying to pay off, that you would want to use as much as possible.
He can't eat by himself.
What do you mean by?
He can't get his own food.
Okay. So it's not a case of, it's not that he doesn't want to sit by himself and eat food, but he literally cannot provide for himself. He's dependent upon other people. I'm sorry?
Why wouldn't he just leave his house and live like he's a book? Just to live in a sewer.
Well, I mean, and again, this is where we're always going to have that issue of, well, what's literal versus, figurative and all that kind of stuff. But basically, he is trapped because they keep him locked in. Now, if there's a change, as you get into part 3, one of the big changes that takes place is they leave the door open. So before he's locked in, and they open the door, and then, initially you see him and you shut it in his face, and I don't want anything to do with that guy, or that thing, whatever it is. But part 3, when it starts off, you find out the door's open, so they could sit there and just be eating dinner, and the door's open for Gregor just to kind of look through, but the idea is that he doesn't want to kind of leave that space.
No relationships.
Okay, no relationships. Justice, we're just making a list of what are Gregor's problems, but we can't say you're a bug or he's a bug with that one. You're not a bug with that one. We'll go ladybug. People like ladybug. By end of part 2, what's the main injury that he has? Because he's already been pushed in the door where he's scraped, but he's got an apple that's been thrown at him from father, because father dislikes him, detests him, disowns him, all that stuff. Come home just like pears start flying at him. At the beginning, and again, I'm not trying to give too much away with part 3, at the beginning of part 3, not only do you find out that, the apple is still there, but it's like lodged in his skin. So, and basically, like the skin is starting to grow over it. So, we take an apple as hard as I can, I peg it into Jack. It's like in your shoulder, and then over time the wound starts to heal. So you have this apple in there. So don't think of it strictly as just being a. It's not just a situation where you got a black and blue mark, but you literally got like an apple stuck in you, and now essentially, yeah, it'd be like a tumor is starting to kind of grow over. Oops, I didn't write down apple. You said living in his own filth? Okay. There we go. Mark?
Got like this animal squeaking thing going on with his voice. No one thinks that they can stand him.
I got animals too.
Okay, so if we can use this. With his change in voice, not only do you have then lack of relationship with anyone, so if you have a difficulty with relationships in the first place, the fact then that you can't even begin any kind of communication, any kind of conversation with someone is just going to compound the issue. Who within the family, and this would go along with the communication issues, who within the family is he most dependent upon? Okay, so his sister Greta ends up being the one that provides most of the food for him. And in part 2, he even makes reference to this. He wishes that he could simply say, thank you. But he can't even do that. When the boss shows up, and again, he can't talk, change in voice, and they don't seem to understand him. So even if you think he has not changed into a bug, the fact that he still can't get his own ideas out, the boss accuses him of stealing money from work, mismanaging funds, being lazy, where you get the sense that all of this stuff is untrue, and he essentially therefore cannot work, but he can't even defend himself against any kind of accusation. So obviously, yes, the physical transformation that has taken place is the main thing, but all these other things kind of start to fall into place along with it. It seems that every time he wakes up, what does he wake up from? And you can't say sleep.
Nightmare.
He has some kind of dreams that are going on, whether it be nightmare or horrible dreams. And he can get into the whole psychology thing about it. Do dreams really mean everything? But it seems that every single time that he goes to sleep, when he wakes up, it's as if some kind of nightmare was taking place. Where at the very least, you would think there must be some kind of mental strain that's going on, and something is bothering him that he can't get any kind of rest from. Connor, you had a hand up earlier. Did you have something else?
She said that he's eating pretty nasty food.
Okay. So if we, and I think you could kind of put all this stuff together. I'm going to put in the fact that he has dreams, limited rest, the living conditions, the food. What happens to his room?
It's pretty gross.
Well, it's becoming pretty gross, and it's getting to the point that now what do Greta and Mom do? They move the furniture around, take things out, take out, his belongings. If you're not eating real food, if you're living in filthy conditions, if people are controlling your living environment, if you don't have any relationships, if you cannot provide for yourself, if essentially you are being disowned by your own family, what is his greatest problem that he's losing? And we already spent a little bit of time talking about this last week. Essentially, he doesn't have his humanity for the most part. Whatever is left is probably going to be just a little part. And again, you go back to the very beginning, he mentions how the boss treats him as if he is a minion with no backbone or intelligence. The way that he feels is certainly very much like a bug. So even if you were to go, all right, Gregor doesn't change into a bug, Gregor doesn't have this transformation, if you still list all these problems that he's having, it's not a good situation that he would be living in. So when we get into problems that he faces, I don't want us just to focus on the fact that he has turned into a bug, but he's having all of these things take place where, loses, or at least losing his humanity. And the best way to get that across is going to be that whole extended metaphor of him end up being a bug. With your note sheet from, oops, where are we at? There we go. The note sheet that we're looking at on Friday, I just wanted to run through these things to make sure we got as much information as possible for them, so we feel like we know where we're going headed into part 3. One other thing with Greta, since we mentioned about his inability to communicate and all that stuff, and I know we mentioned this on Friday, he even gets Greta the Christmas present where she's going to go to the conservatory, but if he's a bug, if he can't communicate, if he's locked in his room, even an act of kindness that he hopes to do, he can't even follow through with giving her that gift because now in his current state, he wouldn't be able to communicate it to her. So not only would it be, there's some things he can't do, there would be some stuff that he has done that he can't even follow through with that. Greta's attempts to feed Gregor. How would you describe relationship Greta and Gregor at various points throughout part 2? She takes on the job as basically feeding him. Is it something that she enjoys doing? Is it something that she detests doing? How does it seem that her viewpoint would be towards having to come in every day, bless you, and feed little ladybug Logan? You don't want to be a ladybug? You could be any insect.
Monkey.
Roly
I want to be a potato bug.
I'd definitely be a roly
Do we need to take like bio?
I would go.
He takes a hammer to a door and you're supposed to screw off, so I mean, like, I call him the monkey.
Logan, you don't have a favorite insect with you, Logan?
Potato bug.
No, that's a roly poly.
What about the white caterpillars that have the little venom in them?
Oh,
You can go
I
around.
would be a centipede. Those things are sweet. They're like, like you said, the poisonous ones like the Amazon, not like the fuzzy ones.
First time that Greta opens the door, when she goes in to feed, very first time she opens the door, what happens? Opens the door, look in. Jumps back, and also does what too? Because if you jump back from a door, slams the door. So first time Greta opens the door, slams it. So indirectly, we don't necessarily know, what is going into her mind process, but the first time that she opens the door to see Gregor, if she slams it shut, she must be completely horrified, terrified of what she sees, petrified, okay? And that's before the living conditions have completely changed, so we're assuming he wouldn't be too much in his own film. Because keep in mind, when she opens the door, it was still that initial day from when he wakes up. Then she kind of starts to become a little bit more accustomed to it, and so she comes in multiple times a day, and she tries to feed him what he likes, which is important, because if you are going to feed, like if it's a person you care about, what was your birthday meal?
Pizza.
So if it's someone's birthday or an important occasion, you get them food that they want. She tries to find food that is best going to suit Gregor, whether it's the old things that he liked, like milk, or it's the new things that he likes, the scraps, the moldy cheese, and all that kind of stuff. So tries to find food that Gregor likes. So while at first she seems to be petrified of what's going on, there does still seem to be some type, maybe not a sibling relationship anymore, but there's still some kind of human connection. Brendan, is Greta younger or older?
Younger.
She is younger. Remember that from your quiz. So Greta is younger sister. So Gregor would be the one who's kind of responsible for her, and most times, what is the switch that now begins to take place? Greta now is in charge of Gregor. So there's a little bit of a role reversal that would take place as well. Greta is in charge. But you get the sense that at the very least there seems to be some kind of care that's going on for him, that this is a person that I'm still going to try to take care of and provide for. You might be locked in your bedroom, but we're not going to try to make this the most miserable thing. If all that he was getting was stale bread and water, then you could argue that this is more like a prisoner situation where I'm going to give you just the basics that you need to sustain. No pizza, no ice cream cake, none of those.
Cheesecake.
What'd you have on your pizza?
Pineapple. Pineapple.
Did you go ham too?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Hawaiian pizza. How would we describe their reactions to the metamorphosis, to the change? And remember, every time we say metamorphosis, really we're talking about change. Mr. and Mrs. Samsa, how are their views similar or different?
Didn't Miss Samsa like faint
Again, in part 2?
again?
Yes. When Gregor comes out kind of scurrying, and scurrying is a word, or scuttling is a term that gets used with bugs a lot. Think of like trying to move really quick with legs flapping all over the place. She does get scared, kind of jolts her and all that stuff. Is there anything before that fainting that would let us know though that she still looks at Gregor as her son? She does want to go with, now she doesn't, it takes a couple weeks, but she does feel the need, the desire, you could argue maybe it's the maternal instinct, she does want to see him. So she desires to see her son. You could argue that what's one of the reasons why she doesn't go in to see Gregor, in the back of her mind, I want to see my son, I need to see my son, and when you open the door, what you see might not be, and even if it's not the bug, if it's still the guy that Brendan got freaked out when he was wiggling the toes, when we were watching the stage thing, that, yeah, the contort, that's not the way I remember my son, being. So there's still certainly probably that fear. She desires to see her son. It takes her 2 weeks to be willing to go in and see her son. And she does help Greta with the furniture, moving stuff around the room, so she is able to go in. But ultimately, when he does come back out, and she gets scared, and she faints, and basically passes out, she fails to still see him as being, her son, her flesh and blood, her offspring, her child. So it seems that she cannot come to terms with what has happened. So she cannot come to, this doesn't look so good, but it says terms, cannot come to terms with what has happened. And yeah, ultimately her fainting, her passing out would kind of prove that again. Mr. Samsa. Oh, Connor, did you? Yeah. Mr. Samsa, his reactions. Wants nothing to do with Gregor. Does Mr. Samsa get a pass from any of you in the sense that, well, at least he lets him stay there?
Yeah. I have like huge bugs there in the house.
It depends. Does he
Yeah, he'd be way
does
down.
he even believe that that's Gregor? Probably not. He put an apple in
He put an
He,
apple.
when he attacks him, I'm thinking the second time with the apples, not so much the first time with the cane
Yeah.
and newspapers and all that stuff. When he attacks him at the same time, you would think at that point, if you still viewed him as being your son, as being your child, that you would try to reason with him. You would do something that is less forceful, less, I don't know if sadistic ends up being the right word, that might be taking that too far, but you're taking an object, you're throwing it, you're hurling it at him as hard as you can, you're trying to, if you're treating him with apples to the point that the apple gets lodged within his skin, I would say at that point you are trying to hurt him. And certainly the hope would be that that is not something, that is not a feeling, that is not an action that would happen between a parent and a child. You know, certainly, you know, whether, you know, when you become parents or as a child, you've been in situations where a person becomes upset with you. That doesn't mean, you know, hey, you didn't clean your room, give me a pear, I'm going to start begging you with a pear. That's going to be going a little too far.
I still water. He's like,
Now, if you take a squirt bottle, that's just saying you're like the family cat that we're trying to keep off the countertops, but we still love you. Changing Greta's behavior, already kind of hinted towards this one. The one thing I would make sure you put at this part is that Greta begins to become more assertive. And this would be in regards to Gregor, and this would be in regards also to Mom. You know, where we don't know what the relationship with Mom was like before, but hey, we're going to change his room. We're going to rearrange the furniture. Okay. This would be the piece of furniture that we should take out. Mom's going to be like, okay. So Mom certainly seems to let Greta take the lead. So she becomes more assertive. She is taking more control. She is certainly making more decisions. And, you know, so you have, as we mentioned, kind of like that change in roles taking place at this point. The arrangement of Gregor's room, furniture starts getting taken out. What is the piece of furniture that Gregor wants to hold on to most? Well, I'm not going to count the picture as a piece of furniture, but we'll still talk about the picture. He likes the couch, because that's his primary place where he hides. And what does he also do to help Greta out? Because she's clearly not happy seeing him, so you have the white sheet, so I'll kind of hide under the couch so at least you don't see me. Besides the couch, what's something that he's upset? Should that be removed? Not the bed. So it's not his dresser, but it's his desk. So it's a place where Gregor goes to write, and keep in mind, you know, Kafka growing up has his writing career that he would like to see flourish, but it's something that Job just doesn't really allow him to do. Why do people write? Why do people draw? Why do people write song lyrics or poems? We're not going to assume Oedipus Rex and Metamorphosis essays would be part of this. But why do people like to create stuff? Well, that's what I'm saying, not doing essays and things like that. But if you have creative thoughts, it's a way that you can express yourself. It's a way that you can kind of make connections. He can't talk to anyone. He doesn't have communication with anyone. And not to say that he's been picking up pens and pencils either, but if that writing desk gets taken away, then he loses the ability to express himself. You know, different ways that we express ourselves could be through writing, could be through music, could be through clothes that you wear. Red flannels are a popular expression.
I had a green flag.
Where's your red flannel?
At Kara.
Kara's 50 seats.
I don't even own a flannel.
I have a green one. I like hardcore. I had one for
Mr. Franks and I, English teacher, are also matching. He went khaki pants, green sweater. It's a good color combo. But the arrangement of the room, again, going back to those issues that he's dealing with, the inability to express himself would be taken away. And then Logan, you mentioned what's his most prized possession? The picture, which if there was any doubt that, you know, how important was the picture of the woman to him with the homemade frame that he made, the gilt frame, as they're taking the furniture away, that's the one thing that he has the ability to protect, that he does basically kind of jump on and go, no, you can't take this away from me. And, you know, in a way, it kind of emphasizes, if I can't have a real human connection, I'm at least going to have this connection with this item that is of importance to me. As weird as it sounds,
That's so weird.
When you go to, and don't squish stink bugs, because that's when the smell starts.
That's great.
What
I
would-
didn't know about that one.
When you go to get the bug or the centipede, we don't kill ladybugs because that's bad luck. When you, if you go to squish the bugs, they don't run on a piece of newspaper and go, we want to save this newspaper. They don't run onto a notebook. They don't run onto the water bottle as we're going to protect this little piece before you squish me. They don't go on top of that Lego piece that your kids always forget to clean up. Not that that makes me bitter.
I don't have kids.
Go ahead.
Actually, Jack's my kid. I forgot about that story.
You can later, just not now. But when when you go to squish something that doesn't have any human qualities to it, it's not that it tries to protect any items. By the fact that the picture of the woman is something that he still protects, that lets you know where we said that he's maybe beginning to lose his humanity, that he still does have some kind of human desires or qualities that he is able to still recognize things that are important to him, and he has limited control over anything. That's the one thing that he still wants to have some, and he made it, some ownership of. And certainly, if it's something that belongs to you, that you have created, you would think that he would want to view it as being much more important to him. So that gumball machine project that you bring home from Intro to Wood, while you might not use it every single day, you'll still hold on to it, or Mom will still hold on to it because it's something of yours that you have, actually worked on. Important to note, and we already kind of talked about the scaring that would happen with Greta and Gregor's and the mother when Gregor comes out. Changes in Mr. Samsa. What are some significant differences between him now in part 2 than what we had in part 1? Because one of the main things that we said as to why the change in Gregor's a bad thing is he can no longer work, he can no longer provide for the family. What has Mr. Samsa started to do? Works at a place. It's not a factory. He's at a bank.
I heard he was like really out of place.
And he has uniform that he wears that he seems to take maybe a little bit more pride in. He wants to make sure that the buttons are, nice and shiny and brass and all that kind of stuff. He does have the ability to work. He has maybe a change in his demeanor where he does become a bit more active. Which it's important to recognize then that the potential for income, money was always there, but it was something that he wasn't necessarily going to do unless he absolutely apparently had to do it. So the potential for him to work is certainly there. He is becoming a little bit more active. He's becoming a little bit more dominant. He becomes a decision maker as well. So he goes from that passive role to someone who is being more assertive. Second injury, we know the apple. It is embedded in his skin. And this is something that we'll get a little bit more detail about it in the beginning of part 3. One thing to note about this is it is a very serious injury. Some folks put a little bit more symbolic significance to the apple, in the fact that you have a father figure who is using an apple as a way to punish his child and then exile him. Well, you mean like from the symbolic quality? What? Yeah, guys, take a seat. Sit down. Apple's an apple. The symbolic quality that folks can go with is you have a father-like character who is making the children, punishing them with an apple, and keeping him exiled in his room. Folks will argue that this is illusion taking place, religious allusion to original sin of Adam and Eve being kicked out of the Garden of Eden, that the father figure uses that. It is thrown so hard that I chucked the apple in it. No, the idea is it's an apple. So like if I mean this would be, we're not gonna go home and try to eat us.
Check.
Um,
Shoot on it.
If, you know, say you're a rock, you know, and so it physically penetrates the skin, and then it eventually heals over. That's what's going on with him. So the fact that that would be impossible to do is kind of like where you get more argument for that symbolic quality. Now, it can still, because he takes it from the bowl that's sitting out, you know. We got random rocks that we're just going to sit around. No, it would be an apple.
See you, Mr. Ken.
See you tomorrow.
We're out.